All right, guys, we're here on a job site. We've worked here before, taking down some cedar trees and some maples there in the front of the house. A customer wanted this large cedar tree taken down. It's got about 3 tops to it. Definitely some challenges. You got the highway here to my right side, power line right in front of the cedar here. So I'm working by myself on this tree to get it down. I'm just kind of trying to figure out a game plan of getting it on the ground. It's pretty large, over 4 feet in diameter at the base there. Because this tree was so large at the base with the vines growing around it and these arms shooting off in all sorts of directions, I decided to go ahead and use a ladder to access the tree. That was the safest route and the most energy efficient. It's really difficult to lanyard up trees that have vines growing up them. So if you can, grab a ladder and then access it that way. You can also shoot a line into the top of the tree and use SRT or DRT to access it. So first thing to do is just get the limbs out of the tree. We're on the right side of the stem closest to the house. And I'm just taking these limbs out so that I can top this tree out. As you're cutting this close to a structure, you got to be careful that the branches don't hit tip first. If they do, there's a potential they can actually spring forward away from the tree and hit a structure. So always think about how you're making those cuts. And as you can see here, some of these are pretty large limbs and they're difficult to grab onto and control. So utilize those face cuts, the 2-cut process where you make a cut and then go behind that one and make another cut to drop the limb straight down rather than it trying to nosedive. Also, some of these limbs, like I just cut there, you have to be really careful. You may be cutting a limb on the bottom and think that that limb's going to just fall right down. Well, it's actually looped over another limb above it. And if you cut that one off at the bottom, it can actually slide down the other limb and right into the side of a structure. So always look around and see how the limb is positioned so that you don't have that happen to you. As you can see, I'm not cutting all these limbs flush to the stem. And you've probably seen me do this before on other videos. I'm doing that specifically in this situation because we have the highway pretty close to this tree. And there's quite a bit of a slope for the driveway. If I were to cut all these limbs flush to the stem and I'm taking sections down and dropping them onto the road, there's a very good chance they could hit hard enough they can actually roll into the road. Leaving those little nubs on specific parts of the stem like I have here will keep that tree from rolling, that section that you drop. So always do that if you have a slope or something that you need those pieces to stay put as soon as they hit the ground. In just a second, I'm going to cut off another chunk of this tree. Watch what happens when it hits the ground. Okay, you have to be really careful of that happening. If you have a customer down there or a groundsman that's working and that piece hits with that type of force and explodes, obviously those chunks can go flying all over the place. So if you can, always have a customer or your groundsman or anybody working on the ground hide behind something as you're taking these chunks down and they hit the ground. Okay, as you can see here, I moved my lanyard to a better spot. Be really careful. If you got limbs that are sticking out as you go down the stem, you may have your lanyard getting caught up on those, and it'll be on the back side of the cut where you can't see very well. So just be really careful that you'll end up cutting right through that lanyard. At this point, we took down that right stem as far as I could, and now we're working on the left side of this tree to get it limbed out and chunked down. I'm not quite where the power line is, but I still have to be careful that I don't have any limbs go flying in that direction. Once we get this piece down, we're going to move over into that really big sweeping arm right over the power lines, and that's where we got to be super careful about limbing and topping it out. So taking the top out of this part of the tree, I had to be super careful. I only had a little window down there to put this top into. So go slow, take your time. And you gotta be really careful because these tops will deflect off of limbs and roll. And I got a power line to my right side here I have to be careful of. Here I'm dropping my lanyard and I'm just swinging over real quick into that sweeping arm that we need to take down. It's right over the power lines. You can see it there to my left side. Doing a swing is so much more efficient than messing around with spiking down and then having to move over and then spike back up another stem. So utilize your rope above you. As you can see, I was just using a Rescue 8 to do this. It's very efficient, easy to do as an SRT device. You can use a lot of different devices, but I've used that Rescue 8 more than anything else.
The piece.
There's always going to come a point where you guys need to switch your saws out, get something a little bigger. Don't waste your time continuing to cut with a small limbing saw when you can bring up a much more powerful saw to get your chunking process done. Here I'm utilizing snap cuts for all these sections that are coming down. Don't waste your time trying to make face cuts on everything. It's not always that efficient. Here you'll see I'm using a face on this part just because the section's starting to get a little bit bigger and heavier to try and tip. That's when those face cuts come into play. Otherwise, stick to the snap cuts. They're faster to do. Here you're going to see me hesitating a little bit on this section. I don't like dropping logs on top of others because of this right here. Okay, you see what that did? The only reason that log flipped like that was because there were other logs on the ground that it hit. If you can, always move log sections before you drop more, because you can end up in a bad situation like that where it goes right into the road. Now that we got the majority of the tree on the ground, this is still the first day. I'm just grabbing the little 17G John Deere and getting all this debris moved in the log sections so that we can prepare for another morning of cutting to get the final part of the tree down. These excavators are amazing at getting debris cleaned up and moved. This machine only weighs 4,000 pounds, but I use it all the time for tree work, and it's just incredible. Always keep in mind while you're doing tree work, think ahead. How are you going to move debris? Where are you going to put your log sections? Where are you going to stage everything so you can get it in your dump trailer or export it on a larger end dump truck? So just always think ahead. While I was taking this tree down, I was planning on where I was going to put my machine, how I was going to stage brush, and so that I'm not wasting a bunch of time when I get out of the tree. I got it all set up here. I'm putting the log sections over there, here to the left side, and I'm going to put all the limb debris up top on the landing so I can pull my dump trailer right along this retaining wall and load from a higher position. That's always your best route when trying to get debris in your dump trailer.
Okay guys, we're back on that job for the cedar tree that had 3 tops to it. We're gonna get this last section down in here. Trying to avoid the power line here on our right side. There's a highway back here, obviously. You can see the car going by. Then we have an addition to the house right here on the left side. So we got some obstacles to try and avoid hitting. You see up here, I left a bunch of stubs as I went up you'll see where I left a bunch of stubs up there instead of cutting them flush to the stem. I'm doing that so that when these sections come down, when they hit the ground, they won't have a tendency to want to roll because we got the highway back here. So that will stop them from rolling, hopefully, as we drop log sections in here on the road. We'll basically take the top out, chunk this down right to around where this right stem was cut off. And then we're gonna put a line in here and we're gonna make a big cut in the bottom here, face cut, back cut, and we're gonna pull the whole section over right here into the yard. That's the plan. It's gonna be interesting trying to scale up this thing and get back into that central stem there. Probably should have just left a rope in it, but this is about a week ago when I took these other 2 pieces down. So anyway, we'll get started.
So I decided to go ahead and use a ladder again. I was not about to try and scale that with my lanyard. So I just threw a ladder against this thing, climbed up, and got into this central leader, which is the largest of the 3 tops this cedar had, and started limbing and chunking this to the ground. Even though this was the largest leader on this tree here, it was actually easier to deal with because the limbs weren't in any risk of hitting the structure over there and the power line. So it's pretty easy. I could just go straight up and cut these right off and just move quickly up the stem before I could top it out. So try and save your easier stuff, you know, maybe towards the end, so that when you're really tired or you've been climbing for multiple days, you kind of take it easy on the last part. So remember guys, when you are taking chunks out of trees, try your very best when using those snap cuts to get these sections to land as flat as possible. The flatter they are when they hit the ground, especially from way up, 100 plus feet, they'll usually hit and they might try to rotate a little bit or flop, but it usually doesn't move very much. It'll stay still. If you hit tip first or something like that, I mean, they can go all sorts of directions that you don't intend them to. Although I could finish chunking this down with the 261, it's a lot more efficient to grab a bigger saw. This is the 44, and it's been ported, so it's got a little bit more power, but it blasts right through this larger section here. Probably it's a few feet in diameter, I bet, at this point, and it only gets bigger as we go down. Cedar trees are notorious for hanging your lanyards up while you're trying to go up or down the tree. It's extremely frustrating. As you can see, this piece of bark caught both lanyards and wouldn't allow me to move them down the tree. So you have to be really careful that, and that earlier I explained to you, your lanyard can get caught on a limb on the back side and you can end up cutting into it. Well, the same thing will happen here on a cedar tree. So always think about where that lanyard is on the back side of the tree. If you're not sure, rotate around the tree and take a look. This is where making really deep face cuts, more than 50% of the tree, helps you out a lot. So if the stem is really straight for you, make a deep face cut. You can go all the way as far as 70% of the tree for that face before you come in and make the back cut. And what that does is you're already off balancing that section, and when you go to make your back cut, it'll just fall right over and you won't have to really give it any pressure or push in the back. You only do this though if the stem is very straight, or you can visually look up and down it from the side and make sure you're going to off balance that section. Because if you make a mistake, you don't have room in the back to put in a wedge. It can actually fall backwards against the lean, which would be extremely dangerous. As you can see, this face is really deep, probably about 70% of the tree. Watch what happens when I make this back cut. I don't even have to push on it. It'll just fall right over and cave on itself. So unfortunately, I was getting real close to the end of this job. Saw was cutting great, and I ended up hitting a bunch of steel right around in here. I felt it, and then the saw started cutting just terrible. So I pulled it out of the cut just to verify I did hit steel, and you'll see right here, it's just not cutting at all now. So what happened was there was a cable growing through the tree for power a long time ago, and it actually was in the core of that right stem. So I had to go sharpen up and get back into the tree and keep working. So I said just forget it with trying to cut that arm off. I decided to go ahead and just make a face cut here below all this steel and just pull the whole entire section over. The customer wants to make a carving out of the lower half of this tree, so it worked out pretty good. Looking back, I probably wouldn't have used a ladder on this again. I would have just went ahead and got into it with a lanyard and made the cuts. It was kind of a pain moving around the tree trying to get this huge face out of it. It worked out, but just FYI, if you have to do something like this, probably easier to just go ahead and lanyard up it and make your face and back cuts. Even though this section is pretty large, it's probably 4 feet in diameter, and it weighs a considerable amount. We had the line set at the very top of this section, so that little excavator, even though it's not very big, can put quite a bit of pressure on this stem here to pull it over, just because of the leverage point of view of how high we got that line. So don't underestimate these little machines to be able to pull over trees or larger sections like this. Just throw a rope as high as you can, get as much leverage as you can, and you'll be able to do quite a bit of stuff with them. If you can, when you're making face cuts on really large trees, always use a humble cut like I'm doing here. The reason for that is it'll slide right out just like this. It's really difficult to get those faces out if you're doing a conventional, because you actually have to either use an axe or try and pull it out by hand, whereas let gravity work for you. Use that humble, the face will just drop right out for you. It makes it so much easier. So here I'm just checking how much holding wood I have. I'm making sure I don't cut that hinge off. And I can't really see the other side very well, so I got down, tried to pull it over, and the whole top was starting to come over, but there was still just a little bit too much holding wood. And we're not talking about much, so I had to set the ladder back up, get in there, and make that final cut, and the customer actually pulled over this section. And that's it. That pretty much completed our job for the day. Alright guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. This was quite the job to get this cedar on the ground, but it all worked out and we got it down safely. So stay tuned. I got quite a bit more videos I'm going to be posting up. I've just been getting behind on getting these things on YouTube. So thanks for watching guys. God bless. I'll see you on the next job.